Yeah, Bodog poll question today. We're asking you, what's the most interesting Canucks camp battle? Backup goaltender, defenseman 4 through 6, fourth line. You can vote at Sekeres and Price on Twitter. Bodog, your source, free casino game, sports odds. It's time to play at bodog.net. I was just looking for some value in these most goals scored, least goals scored props for the NHL season. The Tampa Bay Lightning are the 8th choice to score the most goals. You know, this is a team that, usually has a big guy like a Stamkos or a Kucherov or whatnot out of the lineup. And I know they don't necessarily have the same depth that they have had in the past, but at plus 2,800, I think they're worth, a small bet here. I think that's still a pretty offensively inclined team on your Bodog line of the day. Here he is, one half of the Rink-Wide duo with Andrew Wolanin. They were back at it yesterday, pregame, postgame, every game with Rink-Wide, and our Canucks reporter, Mr. Jeff Paterson, on a Canucks off day. How we doing, Jeff?
Yeah, doing all right. Just trying to digest what went on in Edmonton last night. Still trying to figure out exactly what the point of the exercise was, to be perfectly honest with you, with the lineup that they sent. But credit to the guys that threw on Canuck colors last night. They played hard, certainly played harder than the group that performed or didn't perform down in Seattle on Saturday. But end result, I think, pretty predictable. I know it wasn't a 7. It was a 7-2 final score, but it wasn't a 7-2 hockey game.
Yeah,
No.
and you bring up a really good point. Like in the era of like watching carbon footprints and just wastes of time, why are you going through the rigmarole of flying that team to Edmonton to perform like that? Like, what? Like, honest to goodness.
Hey, it's what we always say about the Whitecaps. When you go somewhere across country to come back with a 0-0 draw, like, let's just call the whole thing off.
At least they got a point out of a 0-0 draw. No, but like, why not cap it at 4 games, raise the minimum of veterans to 12 per game, and just say, listen, it's to get ready for your season, not to like look at prospects. That's another time. Like, it just seems really irresponsible, Jeff. It seems ridiculous.
No, I'll take a shift on your bandwagon, Blake. I'm all over the 4-game preseason, and we have seen preseasons in other sports be reduced, and it makes sense. And yeah, I think you could absolutely extend camp to 5 days and reduce the preseason to 4 games. You have a pretty good sense of what you're doing anyhow. There's going to be a couple of storylines, probably an injury along the way where you have to get a look at maybe some guys that you figured you didn't have to look as long and hard at, but I think you could absolutely accomplish everything and come to the same decisions for your opening night roster with 4 preseason games as you could with 7, or dare I say, the Oilers are playing 8. So the Canucks and the Canuck fans are fortunate. They're only being forced to endure 7, but 5 down, 2 to go. So hopefully we're into the home stretch here with something that resembles the opening night lineup.
Yeah, and I'd be A-okay with just the one home preseason game, as we were talking about with Shannon yesterday. Take the team out, get it to places that it doesn't normally go, get kids a chance to see some of their heroes in a lower-cost environment, have the one dress rehearsal at Rogers Arena, particularly when the building's going through all the renovations that it's going through. All right, we're almost through preseason. Let's get to today's Bodog poll question. Jeff, most interesting Canucks camp battle? Is it backup goaltender, defenseman 4 through 6, or that fourth line? What says you?
Yeah, I think the goaltending battle is over now based on the waiver wire, and we'll see. Canucks may be fortunate here putting Colin Delia on waivers today. You saw Cam Talbot in Ottawa out 6 to 8 weeks or something, and the Sens had to jump on the waiver wire. Colin Delia is a guy with NHL experience. I don't anticipate that he would be claimed, but timing sometimes can play a factor in all of that. So let's see what happens, but it certainly looks like the plan is to get him to Abbotsford, not for tomorrow night's game, but for the regular season. And I think from that, you take that Spencer Martin is going to be the backup, and I think Spencer Martin probably gets the full pull in Abbotsford for the preseason game against the Oilers, and then Thatcher Demko plays the Friday game. So for me, all along, it has been, how is this defense core shaking down, not just 4 through 8, but really 1 through 8. And I assume that they're going to keep 8 defensemen and 13 forwards to get to their 21 skaters, although they don't have to. They don't have to be at a 23-man roster. It can be lower than that. So with cap implications, perhaps they don't even start with 23 on the opening night roster, but they are going out on the road for 5. So I think that they probably want the healthy bodies that are available to them. Last night, I think it just kind of muddied the waters again. Good on Christian Wolanin, stepped up. There wasn't a whole lot to take out of that game other than, that was a pretty solid performance from him. And I don't know that Canuck fans know an awful lot about Christian Wolanin. I was just looking at his body of work. He has played 70 games in the National Hockey League with 3 organizations that weren't exactly at their height when he was there. The Los Angeles Kings, the Ottawa Senators, and the Buffalo Sabres. And through all of that, in 70 games, he's put up 20 points, which isn't terrible production from a defenseman when you think last year only Quinn Hughes and OEL had more than 20 points on the Vancouver Canuck blue line. And this guy, through 3 organizations and different seasons, when he's been given opportunities, has been able to step in and play. And I thought last night there was a whole lot to like in Christian Wolanin's game. And actually, I liked what I saw from him the other night in Seattle. Did he do enough to remain in the conversation as a depth guy? To me, I think he's headed for the American Hockey League to start. But these performances, they've got to at least leave management and the coaching staff with something to remember him by. So I don't think he's going to make this team out of training camp. But on a night when there wasn't a whole lot else going on in Edmonton, I thought a pretty solid foot forward for a guy like Christian Wolanin.
Well, one less guy to compete with for Christian Wolanin, because he remains on the roster as one of the 29 players that is hanging around. Danny DeKeyser. And, it was a great idea bringing him in because why not? It's free. But he didn't do it. He didn't do it, Jeff. He's not good enough right now to bother with the contract.
The mobility just didn't look like it was there.
Yeah, and when you're on a PTO, it's not enough to just tread water. Like, you've got to step forward. You have to separate, and you've got to earn a contract. And so even if they like you, the question is, have you done enough to earn that contract? You're here on a free tryout, and I agree with you. DeKeyser, it wasn't terrible. He looked like a guy who had 500 games of NHL experience, but as the league gets faster and his foot speed doesn't, there just wasn't enough in his game and the opportunities. Last night in Edmonton, they didn't have to do a whole lot of penalty killing, but through 2 periods, he was the low ice time guy among the 6 defenders that they had, and there was hard. It's hard to find an NHL defenseman among the group there. So I think his utilization, the fact that they sent him to Edmonton when none of the other vets went, there's probably some messaging there, like, this is your last chance, you better step up. And so not surprised at all that it didn't pan out for Dan DeKeyser based on what I saw through training camp in Whistler and the preseason action that he was able to perform.
We're going to blow you away here. Guillaume Brisebois didn't make the lineup.
Yeah. Well, and Jolson keeper, so they're stocking their defense in Abbotsford if they get through waivers. One player who does not require waivers and has been assigned to the Abbotsford Canucks, and I think we all have to be a little disappointed that Will Lockwood didn't push a little more than he did. We thought he was a guy who had a chance to play on the 4th line. They went out and signed the 4 forwards in free agency. That was going to make life difficult for Lockwood, but then came the injuries to Mikheyev and Besser, opening the door a crack. Alas, the door is closed here. What did you make of Lockwood during camp?
Yeah, just wanted to see so much more. Really kind of fit into my do something category every night out, and it just didn't happen for him. And last night on a line with Curtis Lazar and Jason Dickinson, so he had an opportunity to play with a few of the NHL vets that actually were sent to Edmonton last night, so he can't complain about not getting put in a position. He had quality line mates, and in his role, if he was going to make the team, it was sort of going to be in that grinder mode with players like Lazar and Dickinson, and so the effort was there. Like, I'm not suggesting that he wasn't out there trying, but speed is supposed to be one of his separators. I honestly, I thought he looked faster last year when he got his call up in his late season audition. I don't know if it's just a sign that the rest of the league is sort of catching up in the overall speed. It doesn't allow a guy like Lockwood to stand out. But, if he was ever going to carve a spot in the National Hockey League, it was going to have to be as a penalty killer. I don't think his work there was exemplary. And so I would say, and I think he would think too, as he gets sent down, that, missed opportunity and a disappointing 10-day period here in his attempt to become a full-time National Hockey Leaguer.
I think the young goalies have to be a little bit disappointed that they weren't able to show their wares more too, Jeff. We've talked about Demko getting a fair amount of ice time here in the early part of the preseason. He's likely to come later on in the week as well. But Michael DiPietro gets 20 minutes. Artur Silovs gets 23, almost 24 minutes. That's all for either one of these players. That's surprising for me.
Yeah, the goalie utilization's been a little bit curious to me as well. And DiPietro is just the forgotten man, like really curious to see where it goes from here. Hard to prove to other teams what you can do if you can't get into the net. And I just think most teams have a player like Mike DiPietro. And if there was a real hunger to get your hands on him, that there would have been a team out there that was willing to take a flyer. So I don't know where it's going to go from here for Mikey DiPietro. Artur Silovs, they're high on. He's going to have to push for the net down in Abbotsford, but they certainly don't want 3 guys there. So is DiPietro destined for the ECHL? Can they offload him, with next to no return? Again, really curious to see where it goes from there. But for Spencer Martin, now the path is here. And Spencer Martin has barely played. He got into action on that opening night of the split squads, hasn't played since. This is sort of the rhythm and the routine that he's going to have to get used to as an NHL backup. But if you do look at their schedule, they're on that 5-game road trip to start. They have back-to-backs middle of that trip, so he's likely to get one of those games. And then there are back-to-backs. They come off the road. They're in Seattle and home to Pittsburgh in late October. And so in the first 10 or 12 games, there are a pair of back-to-backs. You'd have to think that there'll be 2 starts for Spencer Martin out of the gate. And, of course, that plays into Thatcher Demko's usage and utilization. And wouldn't it be great if the organization could get ahead of the ball, or ahead of the curve, rather, in that regard, and not run Demko into the ground early on. But a lot of that's going to depend on Martin. When he gets his opportunities, can he hold up his end of the bargain? And we shall see. Looked terrific in those 6 games that he appeared in last year. But come on, a .950 save percentage at the NHL, that ain't going to happen again. Like, that was lightning in a bottle for Spencer Martin. It earned him the contract. But, my question remains, can he produce 10 wins, or can the backup position, whoever it is, produce those 10 wins that I've talked an awful lot about with you guys? That's still very much up in the air, and I think something to monitor as this season rolls along.
It may well depend on Travis Dermott's health. But as we sit here right now, Jeff, Langley's Kyle Burroughs, Christian Wolanin, or both, who makes the opening night roster, if not lineup, roster?
Yeah, those guys definitely in the battle, I think, to stick around here. And again, if this team is keeping 8, and I have to think they will, I think Burroughs has a leg up. I think it's been a pretty good preseason for Kyle Burroughs. I think the coach likes Kyle Burroughs. He's game. He was willing to mix it up in the home preseason game last week against the Seattle Kraken. He knows that that's part of what he has to do. And he and Wolanin last night, essentially the matchup pair, and held up their end of the bargain. I know Connor McDavid wasn't going 100 miles an hour, but he was out there. And Leon Draisaitl and his line with Hyman, like, they were dealing last night. And when you're playing the Oilers and you're a top pair defenseman, there are no shifts off, because you know that they're going to throw guys at you. And that was a pretty good looking Oiler lineup. And I just thought overall a really solid night for both Burroughs and Wolanin. Jack Rathbone in that mix as well. I've sat here and I've tried, and I'm not sure that I can come to any conclusion about those spots 4 through 8 right now, and in what order, and where's Luke Schenn and all of that. And if Luke Schenn is your 4th defenseman, then they really haven't advanced the cause as an organization, and it certainly doesn't look like they have. But to your point, Matt, Travis Dermott, I think, figures into this equation because he can play both sides, and it depends where they want to play him, and then what's the trickle-down effect there, but also go a little higher on the pecking order. Is Quinn Hughes going to start on the right side, or was this just a preseason experiment? We haven't seen Hughes since last week, so I assume that we will see him at least once, if not both of these games coming up here to wrap up the preseason. And I'll be really curious to see, does he play one on the left and one on the right? Is he stuck over on that right side? If he plays these final 2 on the right, then I think from that you can deduce that they're going to start the season with Quinn Hughes as a right side guy. Then that opens the door over on the left. But is Travis Dermott healthy enough to walk on through? The coaches had no update whatsoever. It was a week ago today that Dermott was helped off the ice out at UBC and hasn't been seen since, and really hasn't been spoken about. I asked the coach yesterday, point blank, is there an update on Dermott? No update. So, we don't even know the nature of the injury, let alone the prognosis or the recovery time here. And if you listen closely, you can hear that clock ticking towards opening night 1 week from tomorrow. You'd have to think that Travis Dermott needs to get a couple of skates and maybe even a game in under his belt here to be ready for that game on October 12th in Edmonton.
So is that 3 players for sure out of the opening night lineup then? Are we going to be comfortable?
Well, Dermott, I'm not going to go there with Dermott yet, but let's see when they get back on the ice if he's available here in any form, whether he skates with the playing group or just on his own. It's an off day today, so we're not likely to get any kind of update there. But yeah, I mean, with Besser and Mikheyev, and Mikheyev apparently was supposed to test it today and skate on his own, but if it's a knee sprain, to be ready and up to NHL speed by this time next week, I'm not convinced. So as I sit here, I'm anticipating that Besser and Mikheyev aren't ready to go. Do they start on IR, or do you keep them on the roster? Like, again, there's so many hurdles and cap gymnastics involved in all of setting that opening night roster. And so even if they're not available, you may have to keep them on the roster just to get your cap compliant. So there's some real difficult decisions, I think, that are still ahead here for the Vancouver Canucks, both on the ice, but also off the ice as well.
Yeah, we're going to get into some of them as we go forward here this week. Rathbone waivers, Furland LTIR, because it's now become quite a jigsaw puzzle to come to that opening night roster and line up. And, of course, can all change a day later. Lastly, though, because he is one of the players assigned to Abbotsford, and probably be the last time we talk about him here for, I would think, a few weeks at the very least. Blake, you may want to cover your ears, but Danila.
What? He's not in my stable.
He's not in your stable?
No.
But he's an Eastern European. He's
I know.
Belarusian.
He's got an inside scoop
taking
to
a bit
become.
of a shine to him.
No, as a prospect, come on.
A second-year guy who's still very raw and with limited hockey experience at a senior professional level. What did you make of Danila in his second camp, Jeff?
Young stars, I thought slow start got better, had a big second game where you could see some of the flashes that make him an intriguing prospect. Onto Whistler, didn't look out of place, but again, it was sort of 3 days of practice with a couple of scrimmages. When it's got time to step up a weight class here into preseason games, whether it's against legitimate NHLers or guys that are in the same boat, pretty darn quiet for Danila Klimovich, and I thought last night, and again, they were outmatched, and it was a big ask for anybody, but on the ice for 3 of the goals against by the Edmonton Oilers, and had a nice chance in the first period on power play set up by Arshdeep Bains, kind of cut to the middle, then didn't do a whole lot. And this is a guy we always talk about, Klimovich, in that shot. I wanted to see him pick his spot and, make Jack Campbell make a save or find the back of the net, and it just didn't happen. He kind of threw the puck right into Jack Campbell, so he didn't do a whole lot there. I would say relatively quiet preseason. Not surprised that he's among the cuts at this stage of the proceeding, and sort of like Will Lockwood, if there had been that step and their advancement in either of their careers, you would have liked them to have made it through this round of cuts and taken it right down to the finish line here in the preseason. But I think he was always destined to start the year down in Abbotsford. Let's see, they're a little bit younger out there this year, new coach, so maybe a blank slate, and you hope that he has a top 6 role and a spot in the lineup on a nightly basis and continues to develop. But I think this was the right call by the organization. I just don't think he did enough to force the issue at this stage of the proceedings.
Marvelous stuff, Jeff. We got another one tomorrow before what we think will be the full dress rehearsal Friday, and tomorrow, of course, in Abbotsford. Thanks for this. Catch up then.
All right, guys. Thank you.